Steve Sosebee. He founded the Palestine Children's Relief Fund in 1991 and was the CEO and president until 2024. And in January of 2024, he founded Heal Palestine, a nonprofit focused on responding to the humanitarian crisis in Gaza. So here's Steve. Steve, thank you so much for joining. I wanted to start off by asking you what brought you to Palestine in the first place.
So actually, just to take a step back, I actually went to Palestine first as a student activist. And then having gone during the first year of the first uprising back in December of 1988, I went back and started working as a journalist with the intention of sharing stories to try to educate Americans about what was happening on the ground from what I saw, not the reality of what was actually happening and what I experienced going there firsthand, and what people were conveyed. The information was being conveyed, the reality was being conveyed through the media in the United States. Were not the same thing. So I thought, hopefully, working as a journalist, I'd be able to educate Americans, particularly on how the occupation was affecting the daily lives of common people. And in the course of working as a journalist, I started to meet a lot of injured children who needed medical care they could not get within the local health system, and arrange for children to start coming to the United States for free medical care. And in the course of bringing those kids and getting them treatment, I realized I needed an organization to facilitate that work. It was becoming, something that was taking all my time, and I didn't have the resources. I was in my early 20s to manage this effectively. So I started a nonprofit called the Palestine Children's Relief Fund, and started to build an organization to bring kids over. And then the organization expanded significantly over the years. I must say that the big support came from a lot of people externally to help me get going in those early years, not the least of which was my late wife, Huda Al-Masri, who we got married in 1993 in January. But even in the early years before that, in the year before that, she was actively involved as a social worker, and deserves much credit and respect for the organization being able to get going in those early years.
And what is the effect right now of this genocide on the children of Gaza? And
Oh
what have
gosh.
you've been there, right?
Yeah.
Recently, or are you
Uh,
going there?
right. I'm actually waiting for my permit. So I have a Palestinian ID. So being able to enter Gaza, the Israelis put a different kind of restriction on people going in who have hawiyas, it's called IDs. And that puts different restrictions on being able to come out. So as long as I'm able to go in and go out without significant restrictions, I'm planning to go in 2 weeks or around the 13th. But to answer your question, of course, we have operations going on the ground there, and I'm very much aware, as we all are to different extents, what the circumstances are facing children in Gaza. And I mean, needless to say, it's dire beyond anything we've seen, even in modern history, to be honest with you. And when I mean that, I'm not trying to compare it to every conflict's unique in its own way, but in particular, this one in Gaza is unique in the sense that people have nowhere to go. In Syria and Iraq and Ukraine, and other conflict areas where civilians were being under the barrage of bombs and of risk of death, they could flee, and not easily. And as we saw in Syria, hundreds, if not thousands, of refugees died in the Mediterranean trying to flee. But in the case of just immediate safety, getting out of harm's way of bombings and the destruction that's all around. In Gaza, there's nowhere to go, and there's no safe areas. And that, as a result, we've seen over 10,000 children killed since October 7th. And keeping in mind that that's 1% of the entire population of children in Gaza. So not insignificant, to say the least. And we also see over 30,000 children with significant physical injuries, many of them permanent, amputees and so on. And that also is putting a huge burden on the health system, which is collapsing because there's really only one functioning hospital right now, the European Gaza Hospital in Han Yunis, which I've worked in for many years, and know that hospital very well. It does not have the capacity at all to manage what the trauma that they're seeing, and forget the fact that people who have medical conditions that require interventions, people with heart conditions, people with car accidents, people who have congenital malformations or need any of the common ailments that come up in a normal society, they're not getting treatment at all. And so the casualty toll that we talk about, which is based strictly on the numbers of people being killed by bombs and through trauma as a result of the attacks and the ongoing conflict on the ground. Those statistics do not include the thousands of people who are not able to get adequate medical care for common non-trauma related ailments. And in many cases, those people are dying. And they're also victims because, we were able to treat those patients previously by bringing in volunteer medical teams. We were doing hundreds of missions a year into Gaza and into the West Bank. And those missions are all stopped as a result of the conflict on the ground, of course. And all those patients that we were treating for open heart surgery, for neurosurgery, for cancer, and so on, are not getting treatment locally, and they need to go outside for care. And in the case of those going outside for care, it's extremely difficult to get permits for injured and sick children to travel outside for treatment. Even if you arrange their treatment, which we're doing in Heal Palestine, we're arranging treatment for injured children and sick children to get treatment outside for free. Getting them out is really the biggest challenge we're facing, and it's very difficult to overcome that challenge. But the biggest issue now is not necessarily the immediate health needs of kids on the ground in Gaza, although that's immense and that cannot be, ignored at all. But the bigger challenge is starvation and hunger. And now we see hundreds of thousands of children suffering from the lack of food. 90% of the population there goes at least one day without eating at all. And we're talking about children. As you all know, 40% of Gaza are children under the age of 15. And keep in mind that there are literally hundreds of trucks full of food on the Egyptian side of the border, ready to come and feed children who are showing signs of malnutrition and undergoing the early stages of starvation. So this is strictly a man-made problem, and the fact that food's being used as a weapon of war in this modern era of 2024 is really unconscionable, and it's hard to imagine that this is taking place in front of the world's eyes and that nothing's being done to stop it.
What is the possible justification for not letting in food, or something else that's happening now, which is absolutely horrible to think about, is people are being operated on without anesthesia? What is the possible justification, and chemotherapy is no longer getting through, right? What is the possible
Yeah.
justification for that? What are they saying?
Well, I don't know if there is a stated justification for it. It's definitely a policy. I'm sure there are security issues of checking the trucks, to ensure that they're not filled with arms and military needs. But we all know that prior to October 7th, there were 500 trucks entering Gaza a day, and those trucks were also undergoing security review at Karam Shalom, so crossing in southern Israel. So as a result, I don't think there's a justification that there's too much of a load to adequately review and to check. So there is a political purpose behind it. I think you'd have to review the Israeli stated media. What the politicians are saying in the Israeli media and Israeli press to kind of understand what the justification are. I know that there are now protests among Israelis that is in some cases being encouraged by some ministers in the far right government to block the trucks coming into Gaza. And that's really unimaginable because, you have kids starving, and, these are not combatants. They're not Hamas. They're not people who committed any crimes on October 7th against the Israeli people. They're innocent children. But to come to the realization in your mind that these are somehow justified people who are guilty of any crimes when they're just 3, 4, 5-year-old children, newborn babies, I don't understand it. I don't think anybody understands it, but it's what's happening. And it's affecting all of us. It's affecting everybody on the ground in Gaza and all of us as aid organizations trying to respond to this crisis in a way that can hopefully impact the lives of these people in a positive way.
You have children. Are you afraid? Not just because you're a father, but I would assume that gives you extra fear. Are you afraid for your own safety about going to Gaza?
I never have been before. I've been going to Gaza since 1988. I've been there hundreds of times. I've never had any fear at all going there. In fact, when I was there a few months ago, I was, had a car and was driving by myself around the Gaza Strip and, in every refugee camp and all over the place. So I never felt any personal fear from anyone. But I think if the fear now would be that the bombing campaign seems to be indiscriminate, and that you could easily be near a hospital or near a UN school full of displaced people, many of them children, and still be hit by a bomb or something like that. So as a result, there is some concern about, one's personal safety, but I think you go into this kind of work with the idea that you have a greater mission in your life. You have a responsibility to the cause and the people you're serving. And I don't think throughout history any positive change has happened by people who are putting their lives ahead of the cause. That's not to say I'm jumping into something recklessly and I'm a danger addict or somebody who is careless with my own personal safety. But I run a relief organization. There is a genocide going on. There are people who need help. There are injured children that we need to help. There are hospitals that need medical supplies. There are people who can't get the basics to survive. And if I have a responsibility to help them and also to show them solidarity and that, we are not everybody is, on the side of having their children's lives taken so carelessly and so graphically. Hopefully that'll, you know, show some element of humanity and support that will keep them going as human beings on a human level.
Stephen, you've helped a lot of children in Palestine. Can you tell us a story of someone who either you've helped in the past or someone who you're looking to help now?
Yeah, well, I'll tell you the story of Izzadeen, who was 16 years old in 2018 when he was part of the Great Return March demonstrations, which were taking place at the walls of Gaza. These were mainly refugee youth who were going to demonstrate to demonstrate to the world that they were still refugees and they wanted to return to their homes and mandate Palestine and what is now the state of Israel. Izzadeen, having lost his leg, came to our organization and we were able to arrange for him treatment in the US where he received a prosthetic leg and learned to walk again. And I remember taking him back home on a flight. He was a very sweet boy, always smiling, very polite. And that when he went back home, I started a program to employ amputees in our organization as field workers to give them opportunities to have a future and to gain some element of self-esteem and independence. That was really our goal. Izzadeen came in as a photographer, so we put him with our content creation crew, the guys who were doing our social media and in the field kind of documenting our work. And he just flourished. I mean, he was so happy to have an opportunity. He never thought that he would be able to do something, with his life that he liked doing and that he gave him some income. And for the last year or so, he was just kind of like taking off. And then when on October 7th, when the war started, I was in touch with him and, just encouraging him to stay safe and not to worry about work, but to really focus on his family and staying out of harm's way. But on December 25th, on Christmas Day, his home was hit by an airstrike and him and his entire family were killed. And I've had those stories with several kids that we've brought out for medical care, children that have come to the States for certain congenital defects, or, we had kids, two boys who had maxillofacial deformities of their faces and came to Louisiana for significant reconstructive surgery. They were both killed in a home bombing back in early November. And these were just 13, 12-year-old boys. So you develop ties and relationships with the kids we treat. I have, and hundreds of them, and then their lives are just destroyed in a brief moment, and it's really sad and tragic, and you don't see an end in sight. And for somebody like Izzadeen, who was so young and so full of life and always smiling, and despite having lost his leg and he was for the rest of his life a cripple, he was pursuing his dream, and then to see his entire family killed in a bombing of his home in a refugee camp, that just the whole trajectory of his life, being born into a refugee camp in Gaza, being permanently injured to the point where the rest of his life he had to wake up in the morning and put an artificial leg on to be able to walk, and then an organization coming in and giving him a chance for a better life and to be mobile and be independent, and then to have all that destroyed. This is the story of thousands of Palestinians in Gaza. He's just one of thousands, and every single one of them is very sad and tragic.
And what is the effect of UNRWA defunding on the children of Palestine?
Oh, it's significant. UNRWA is the government for provides government services, I guess. For, Gaza is 70% refugees from 1948, and all of those refugees receive basic humanitarian services from UNRWA. In the case before October 7th, that included education. The schools that are now full of displaced people, those are UNRWA schools for the most part. And then they were receiving food, they were receiving healthcare, primary healthcare, which, again, is for the most part closed down. But UNRWA is just one of the main life sources for the hundreds of thousands of Palestinians inside the Gaza Strip, who without UNRWA would not be able to survive. So, there's no Palestinian government providing them those services. There's no other aid agency on the scale of UNRWA that can come in and provide food, education, and health services for the refugee population there. So to defund them, to take away that critical element of humanitarian support that they're providing at this time, is just beyond on any form. I can't just understand it. If anyone within UNRWA as employees, and they have 30,000 employees in Gaza, participated in the terrorist attacks on October 7th, I don't think that that's a reflection of any kind of official company policy on the part of UNRWA. Those are the acts of individuals, and it's very hard to be responsible for people when you're a company or an organization of 30,000 employees, and especially in the condition that people live in Gaza. So it's just it's a political effort. It's not a security issue, and the people who are suffering are going to suffer from it are the same people who are suffering now, the poorest, most marginalized and vulnerable people in Gaza, which are the refugee children. And there's hundreds of thousands of them.
As someone who's worked with doctors and has seen how important medical care is for children, what do you have to say to the doctors in Israel, the doctors who signed a letter calling for more bombing?
I mean, it's hard to imagine a physician who takes the Hippocratic oath to, do no harm, would support violence in any form. We are all very much aware of, we should be aware of the tradition of kind of the most basic Jewish humanitarian and humanistic ideals. I mean, in the United States, the forefront of the civil rights movement, social justice change, has always been led by the Jewish community, or at least a big significant part of it. And they walked with Martin Luther King. They gave their lives to deal with social justice issues in this country and all over the world, and have been persecuted terribly as a result. And to now see that, and I'm not saying that this has anything to do with Jewish values, but to see doctors in Israel who are calling for continued violence. And we see what that violence means. It's not really having a military effect on Hamas as much as it is resulting in the death of innocent people. 70% of all deaths in Gaza are women and children. So it's just unimaginable. But I think the deeper question is, where is this coming from? Where is this deep-seated hatred or anger? And I mean, of course, some of it comes from what happened on October 7th. And we all know how horrific that violence was. But, I don't think that physicians are beyond the ability to contextualize and compartmentalize these issues, in the sense that things don't happen in a vacuum, and that we need to be able to define our reaction in a way that doesn't harm innocent people. And if innocent people are being harmed, hopefully nobody would find that to be a positive thing or to encourage more of that. I find it strange. I deal with a lot of Israeli doctors. I have over the years. I've always found them willing to help and very, humanitarian in their values. So I don't know who these doctors are, but we see a very worrisome trend in Israeli society. If you have people going down to the border and trying to block aid shipments of food when children are starving, and you see doctors, you see a conference, I think it was a couple of days ago in Jerusalem, where literally a rally to settle Gaza with settlements and on top of the rubble of people's homes. There's a very worrisome trend in Israel that we haven't seen before, to be honest with you, of kind of, and it's everywhere in the world, but it's kind of very graphic right now in Israel with the right-wing extremism and borderline fascism, which we have in the States as well. But in this case, the way it's being played out in Gaza is the results are You know, 1% of all children have been killed. 1%. And that would be, in the context of the United States population, would be 700,000. Imagine if 700,000 children in the United States were killed, you know, through bombing campaigns from a foreign country. You know, it would just be outrageous. So the fact that that's happening and that there are people who support that and encourage it and want to see more of it in a democratic society, in a liberal democratic, what was or traditionally has been a liberal democratic society, is quite worrisome. And it gives us a lot of, I think, fear for the future.
Stephen, you founded the Palestine Children's Relief Fund. You led it for 3 decades. Now you founded a new group called Heal Palestine. Talk to us about your new organization and how people can support it.
Yeah, thank you. So for 30 years, I was very proud of the work we did in PCRF. We built 2 pediatric cancer departments, one in the West Bank in the name of my first wife, and one in Gaza. We opened a lot of different, really incredible projects and programs. We brought hundreds of doctors, treated thousands of children. Very successful work. It inspired, you know, literally tens of thousands of people all over the world to get involved and be active. And we're very proud of that. But when this crisis began, and even before that, I was thinking about, you know, what I could do more than just within the health sector, although that's an area that I want to continue to work in. But I think there's a greater need to expand into areas that I think, you know, I could have an impact. I have 30 years experience on the ground in the West Bank and Gaza. I want to use that in the most effective way. And I felt within PCRF that my ability from a leader and from somebody who's active on the ground far exceeded what the organization's kind of scope is. So I wanted to broaden my impact and to go into the area of education, where I think there's a huge need and there is definite potential for positive impact. And then finally into the area of leadership. And when this crisis began and we started seeing tens of thousands of permanently disabled children in Gaza, I felt this would be a great opportunity to build a program where we use the skills and support of literally thousands of mentors all over the world who can come in and take responsibility for helping to rebuild the lives of these children over the long term. That means, you know, mentoring them, supporting them, guiding them in areas where they could eventually become independent in careers, vocational training, education, and guiding us as an organization to identify the needs of all these kids and ensure that we meet those, whether they're medical, mental health issues, and as we said before, eventually getting to the point where they have career options ahead of them and that we're going to come in and help support those options. So that's where, and literally we have outside of Palestine, one of the most developed diaspora communities of executives, of doctors, of engineers, of accountants, of professional people who are looking for more opportunities to serve their cause and to do something positive for their people rather than just either protest or write checks. And those are important things to continue to do as well. But I think, you know, not tapping into that resource of talent that we can utilize to help rebuild the lives of these children whose lives are being destroyed, I think is we're missing a great opportunity to build a grassroots organization that really utilizes a kind of a new way of effective, impactful change. And by linking the communities abroad with the need on the ground, particularly in the human sphere of rebuilding the lives of these tens of thousands of children who are, you know, facing a very dim future and you know, on the brink of hopelessness, if not already deeply embroiled in it, then we're not doing all that we possibly can as, I think, creative relief people who can use, more importantly, the tools of technology and our communities abroad to make positive change for now and more importantly for the long term. So that's really why I left PCRF and started something new. I thought there was a lot more that I could do, and there's a lot more that our communities could be doing than what PCRF was giving people. As great as an organization as it is, and I was very proud of, you know, founding the organization and leading it for 30 years. There's much more I think I could be doing, and I'm excited about that opportunity.
Any final words that you'd like to share? Thank you so much for your generous time.
Thanks for having me, of course. I mean, I think at this point, we all know what's happening in Gaza. There aren't any secrets about what's really happening and the effect of this war on the civilian population there. What we have to do as people who care about humanity, you don't have to be Palestinian or Muslim or Arab to actually see this as a crime against humanity. And what we have to do is find positive ways that we can help rebuild and repair the lives of these innocent people. My experience in Gaza for over 30 years is they're some of the most kind, generous, resilient, and just very, very decent people who I've never had a negative interaction with in my life. And to just see their entire lives destroyed is very, very saddening. And I think all of us have a responsibility to help rebuild and to help show them love and compassion and to give them opportunities to for them to heal. And that's what my goal is for the rest of my life. And I hope that this war will end soon, that there will be a ceasefire, that we can have some kind of larger political resolution to this issue. It's time for that. This can't continue the way it has for the past 50, 60, 70 years. There has to be some equality and dual national identity in the land of Israel, Palestine, where people can live side by side in security and also as equal and have their identity secured as well. And I think that's critical if we're going to find ever peace there. It's a beautiful land. I love living there. I love working there. But I'm very, very concerned about the future if this situation continues.
Thank you so much, Steve
You're
Sosebee,
welcome.
for your time
My pleasure.
and your work.
Keep up your good work as well. We really appreciate it. God bless you.